I can remember vividly the first time I saw a parent apologize to a child. And I was already 24 years old. And I already had a degree in psychology. And I was floored when I experienced it because I didn't even know that was a thing. I did not know parents ever apologize to children. And so I was shocked. And it took me a while to kind of integrate that into my own thinking. This happened when I was at my cousin's house, and my aunt apologized to my cousin, who was probably about 15 years old at the time. And it really just sort of shocked me in a new way. How come I had never seen this before? What was the power differential? Was this appropriate? How do we do this? And so it sort of opened my eyes to a whole new way of seeing conflict resolution and parents treating children respectfully. Is it easy for you to apologize to your kids? For a lot of people, the answer is no. And there's so many reasons to apologize, from making our own mistakes to saying the wrong thing. We're given so many opportunities, and yet it's such a challenge. Mostly this is because it was not modeled for anybody. Historically, parents did not apologize to children. They didn't really see them as equals or someone who had earned the respect of an apology. But as times have changed, we obviously see this very differently. I think for me, my son was probably about 5 days old the first time I apologized to him, maybe even on the first day. And so we want to put into practice, how do we do this? How do we make it happen? And how do we teach them to apologize by seeing what we're modeling for them? So nowadays, obviously people are viewing children differently, and that is a great thing. But what if this was not modeled for you? What do you do? Where do you start? Part of it is just saying it. And it doesn't matter if your kid is a baby or if your kid is 25. You can start at any time. It's never too late. So what is the purpose of an apology anyway? And what should it be like? The most important thing is for it to be authentic. If I stay too late at a party and my child has a hard time, that is my fault. And if he has a meltdown because of me, I should be apologizing for that. I'm sorry that we stayed too late. It wasn't nice of me to keep you longer than you could manage that. Apologies need to be heartfelt. A lot of apologies you've experienced in your life probably are not. And if someone says, I'm sorry that you feel that way, or I'm sorry that you have to do this now, one, that doesn't make you feel good. And two, that's not really an apology. The word I'm sorry doesn't necessarily mean it's an apology. An apology comes from the heart, and you have some sort of regret in that. This is such important modeling because kids are going to make so many mistakes, just like we are. And we want them to be able to say, I'm sorry. If there's no conflict resolution in your own house, how are they going to be able to do that in the world? How are they going to grow up to do that for their spouses or their own children? It has to start now. So give it a try and see what happens when you say, I'm sorry I made this mistake. I'm sorry that I didn't consider you when I made this decision. I'm sorry that I hurt your feelings. That was not my intention. And if you feel bad about something, an apology is probably the right way to go about fixing that. And that teaches our kids too, right? Like, you'll feel better when you apologize. You'll feel better when you've righted a wrong. So when you do it for your children, when you admit your mistakes, one, and when you apologize for them, two, you are modeling really remarkably for them. A good apology has a lot to do with feeling. So if you mean what you say, which is very important as a parent, if you mean what you say, your message, your feeling will come across to the other person. We want apologies to be authentic and genuine, and we want the other person to feel good in receiving it. So for a child, when you're teaching this, it's really through your modeling. So as you apologize to your child, they know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that. They can take that in as a way to consider the other person when they've made a mistake. Repair is so important. And many people did not learn about repair in their households. For a lot of cultures, it's like sweep it under the rug, don't talk about it, forget about it, wake up tomorrow, pretend nothing happened. It doesn't matter. Except it does matter a lot to a lot of people, and there's so much hurt. So if you're just getting into this now, it's easier to practice on your kids who are so vulnerable and love you no matter what before you start doing it in the rest of the world. But you just have to start putting it into practice. So, a loving apology to your kid feels easier. Apologizing to your spouse might be a little harder. Apologizing for a mistake at work might be a little harder. So take some steps into getting there. Like, don't have too high of expectations all at once. This is a new thing. So build up your own skills and practice apologizing to your spouse in front of your child. Let them see how adults resolve things. Let's see what happens after an upset. Oh, you guys got mad at each other. Now this person's saying sorry. Because what kids see are these ruptures and then nothing. And they don't want to be left alone with those feelings if it happens to them. So it's important that you're modeling and not just with them, but in front of them as well. Parents often call me because their child is not apologizing. And this worries them. Is there something wrong? Should I be concerned? Is this a personality problem? But really, it's just where they're at developmentally. Little kids don't apologize. You can try to train them into saying the word, but then it doesn't have any meaning. So what is the point? And I know you all want to have respectful, polite children, but you can't expect a 2-year-old to say sorry and mean it. So you have to shift your expectations on that. That's definitely something that you will require for your older children. So if your, let's say, 2 and 3-year-old siblings are fighting and you're trying to force one to apologize to the other afterwards, they're not actually getting the message that you're trying to do. They are just repeating words. They're parroting. They're not taking it in. So a little bit later, 4, 5, and 6, that's where we're going to see more really authentic apologies. But in order for a child to mean that they're sorry, they have to be in a space where they can reflect on it, think about it, feel it, because it doesn't feel so good for whatever they did, and then say they're sorry to the other person. And saying sorry is hard. It does not come easily, and it takes practice. So be gentle with them, because this is a skill that, you have to build up. Think of it like building a muscle. It takes a lot of time to get strength in that. So be patient with your child. Some kids need a lot of time before they can say they're sorry, because they're so heightened by the emotion of either feeling guilty that they've done something wrong, or feeling bad, or just being mad still. So you have to give them time to process the feeling, or at least, simmer it down a bit before they can be in a state to say, I'm sorry I did that. I'm sorry I said that. Because until then, it's just parroting your words and not having the meaning that you're hoping for. So what are your expectations for an apology? If your kiddo is 2, they do not have the moral understanding of the apology yet. And they make so many mistakes just based on biological behaviors. Kids throw and toss things and hit and push and do things that aren't polite, but are not intentionally mean either. If you have a very physical boy who just knocks everything down, it's not an aggressive stance. It's a motor problem that he's having, right? He has too much excitement. He has too much physicality for his environment in that moment. So it's not his fault that he's had some sort of interaction that didn't go well. It's age appropriate to have these sort of mistakes happening. So you can talk about what happened and why we're trying to be careful without having to force an apology at that age. As they get older, it's actually really tricky because conscience development is coming in. So between the ages of 4 and 6 or 7, you have a lot of kids with very, very harsh consciences. And we have to teach them to help that voice become a little kinder to them. But in the initial parts, it's very harsh. And so making a mistake feels so bad. And when you feel so bad or so guilty about the mistake that you've made, it is almost impossible to apologize. You feel so stuck. And so then they create another fight with you about whether or not to apologize. So even between 4 and 6, though they're old enough to now have some of that apology back and forth, if you have a kid with a harsh conscience, it is not going to go easily. And you have to be patient. This is, again, not forcing an apology, but when you talk with them later about what happened and how they felt and how the other person felt, you're teaching the empathy, you're setting up the steps for an apology later. But at that point, they're too flooded with feeling to be able to do it. So as we resolve the guilt, then we can get to the point where they're old enough to apologize and mean it and say it without it feeling so dangerous to themselves. So what should you do if your child won't apologize? This is common, right? We've talked about conscience development, we've talked about age, but what if you think your child is age appropriate and just isn't doing it? This is not a time for punishment because there's still something that they need to learn. Why can't they apologize in this moment? You have to be curious about what are the circumstances. Is it that they are flooded too much with feeling? Is it that they're hurt? Is it that they feel wronged? Is it that you only saw one side of the story and they're so mad that you don't understand the whole situation because it is not their fault? So there's so many factors. Take that as your opportunity to just slow down and let some of it go and process it. Let each child process it, especially if it's between two siblings, right? Get both sides, hear both sides, and let both of them feel however they feel. Sometimes the repair doesn't have to have the words, "I'm sorry." Maybe it is just a hug. Maybe it is just letting them sit next to you at dinner, right? That's your peace offering. So there are ways to help get them closer to an apology without forcing it. If they're saying "No, I will not apologize," there's more going on. Maybe apologizing in general is hard, which then we want to figure out why that is. Or maybe it's just that moment. Maybe they're too mad. Maybe they're too something. And we want to figure out what that is so we can help them heal that part so that in the future, they're able to be a little more reflective and give the apology the other person is wanting.